So the Trump administration has stumbled in its initial push to implement the $2 trillion coronavirus aid package, with confusion and fear mounting among small businesses, workers, and the newly unemployed since the bill was signed into law late last month. Small business owners have reported delays getting approved for loans, without which they will close their doors, while others say they have been denied altogether by their lenders and do not understand why. The law's provision to boost unemployment benefits has become tangled in dated and overwhelmed state bureaucracies as an unprecedented avalanche of jobless Americans seek aid. Officials at the IRS have warned that 1,200 relief checks may not reach many Americans until August or September if they haven't already given their direct deposit information to the government. Taxpayers in need of answers from the IRS amid a rapidly changing job market are encountering dysfunctional government websites and unresponsive call centers that have become understaffed as federal workers stay home. Aiding to the confusion were several last minute changes enacted by federal officials to cornerstones of the relief effort, including a revision to the late cancellation of a requirement that Social Security recipients file a tax form before receiving their relief checks. The administration is under immense pressure to get money out into the economy fast. In the past 2 weeks alone, nearly 10 million applied for a weekly jobless claim, by far a record, and fears about the government response are mounting. Ross Zhang, 32, a lighting designer and technician in New York, unsuccessfully tried to call the state's unemployment line for help 50 times on Friday after already attempting to do so dozens of times, being since laid off about a week ago. It is a feeling of powerlessness and anxiety and anger at people in power failing to provide answers, Zhang said. The stress is as much from punishing bureaucracies as from the virus. And that's something that really cannot be addressed enough. Sorry, checking on the chat. Favor policies that give more power to levels of government closer to the people so the solutions are more customized. I don't disagree with that, but I still think there needs to be federal power to support those policies, which is not what's happening now. Uh, so what we need to realize is that Republicans trying to open things up early and put people in incredibly vulnerable situations do not have the financial interests of middle class people at heart, because it would be tremendously not easy, but just basically decent for them to prioritize making sure that the government agencies which are functioning are those which are going to help middle class, working class, unemployed Americans. Instead, you guys, I really cannot state this enough. All the Republican legislation that has passed has included massive bailouts for people who are already billionaires. As always, they are always going to use events like this to just creep their little bailouts for the rich and undetected, with the logic that, oh, well, we can't have this agent. You guys, who do you think is getting this money? Do you think if an airline gets a bazillion dollars, okay, do you think that money is going to the workers? Of course not. It's going to the shareholders, it's going to the CEOs. And it wouldn't be terribly difficult for our government to actually provide what every other government in the developed world is doing, which is a pandemic relief package, which is like, hey, this could take a year to get under control. Literally, this could take easily, if not longer. It's 18 months is the early estimations for when we would have a vaccine, right? And let's not forget that having a vaccine, you then have to vaccinate people. You have to distribute it. And yes, herd immunity is a really exciting concept, but it doesn't actually play out that way. The way herd immunity gets created is a lot of people have to die. So amidst all this, it would be the bare minimum to have an actual middle class American stimulus package which addressed the fact that people are losing their jobs, they're losing their homes, they are not able to go out and search for new employment opportunities the way they normally would, and say, okay, here are 4 months, or here's this large amount of money. Instead, what we're given is $1,200, which is not even the way they determine that was by looking at what a middle or a minimum wage worker makes in a month. $1,200. $1,200 does not go far in most places in this country. It's better than nothing. This bill gives more money to businesses and hospitals. A bailout for business is more important than saving lives. Exactly. Airlines are the reason we didn't close the borders down sooner. Now they get the bailout. Yep. Yep. We are in a situation where a significant portion of our population could die. Die. Not just get infected, but die. And the people that are getting supported are businesses that frankly do not need it. Like, seriously, they don't need it. The people who are going to crash and struggle are ordinary people. And you know what is really fucking terrible is that it's like, I don't think any of the Republican members have any curiosity about the broad spectrum impact that's going to have on our economy. If you have an economy where a third of people are out of work, what do you think that looks like? Seriously, like, what do you think that looks like? It's not a good situation. That will eventually impact every single industry. And this back to the story. The ranks of unemployed will probably swell quickly. About half of small businesses face closure over the next 2 months without emergency help, according to a National Federal Federation of Independent Business survey. Joe Scaldera, 47, for weeks had decided against reducing the hours of his 7-person staff to auto-tune total car because he thought the federal loan program would allow him to cover his payroll. But on Friday, Scaldera's bank told him it would not process his small business application because it is prioritizing clients with existing loans. Scaldera's calls to 3 other lenders have not been returned, and he said he expects to lay off his staff at the end of the week. It's extremely frustrating, Scaldera said. Defenders of the administration's early efforts say the government is facing an unprecedented economic shock, a daunting set of tasks. The novel coronavirus pandemic has forced much of the federal workforce to work remotely and to form its policy response while working from home. The officials reporting to the Treasury Department are getting their temperatures taken as they pass through the entrance, a procedure similar to the adjoining White House and executive branch complex. Part of the federal relief efforts have shown signs of success. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin on Friday announced the Small Business Administration had already processed more than $1.8 billion in emergency loans for small firms, largely by community banks, even though the program is in its infancy. Economists on both the left and the right have praised the bipartisan measures to send checks and shore up unemployment insurance. Yes, but there needs to be a lot more of it. Again, every other country in the developed world is doing so much more. We should all be getting $5,000 minimum. Minimum. Think about what $5,000 is. That's not even, that's like, for a family, that's like a month's living expenses. And this is going to go on for a year, guys. A year. Secretary Mnuchin takes very seriously his responsibility of executing the largest economic relief package in history to help American workers, families, and businesses. Treasury spokeswoman Monica Crowley said in a statement, citing the rapid launch of the small business program and the 1,200 check payments, as well as the hiring of outside firms for the airline loan program. The secretary and the entire Treasury team are fully committed to the fast and successful implementation of the CARES Act to provide much needed assistance to the American people. Mnuchin has wielded enormous personal control over the allocation of hundreds of billions in emergency funding, closely reviewing not only policy decisions but also department informational pages and news releases. Some officials at Treasury have griped that Mnuchin's close personal involvement across numerous efforts risks creating a bottleneck that slows the urgent process of dispersing the aid, according to 3 people who have spoken with government officials in recent days. Former Treasury officials have also faulted Mnuchin for not doing more to fill key positions in Treasury's ranks with the experts. More than a dozen senior positions in Treasury were unfilled heading into the crisis, creating a wide vacuum between the career staff and the highest levels of management. It's one thing to turn the water on full blast, which is what Congress did with the $2 trillion stimulus, but the water still has to get through the pipes. Yes. families who can't make it might wanna look at living in community. I mean, cool. Like, see, I would love that. Seriously, like, I would love to live in a intentional community, but our society isn't set up for that. I agree that communes are good praxis. It's like the problem with that, though, is it puts the onus on us, which maybe it is, and maybe that's just what we have to accept. But we should still ultimately live in a country where housing is affordable and a human right. I agree that communes are better. I'd love to live in a commune. I think that'd be great. I've done it before. Like to do it again. But at the end of the day, like, okay, so I live in DC, right? Where rent is just outrageous. Like, where am I going to find a commune, you know? And I'm saying that because I've tried. Like, I've lived in group homes with other conscientious individuals. It doesn't function that way. I mean, I don't know Montreal player. Like, the idea that people should be creating intentional housing communes as an alternative to basically uh basic housing justice is something I just sort of take issue with. Yeah, I mean, I love that sort of living situation. It's ultimately way more difficult to create than you would think, and that's not even the point though. The point is people should be able to afford housing, period. Yeah. The shortage risks delaying a massive effort in which speed of the essence at all levels of the economy. Some large corporations walloped by the outbreak are searching for answers about how they can access more than $400 billion in emergency federal spending. Mnuchin, for instance, has said that the government will probably seek equity stakes in the airline companies in exchange for emergency aid, a demand that airlines are angrily rejecting. Airline lobbyists are planning to press the White House National Economic Council and President Trump directly if Mnuchin does not back down, according to a person with knowledge of the strategy who spoke on the condition of anonymity to freely discuss private deliberations. Attention last week centered largely on the law's SBA program, the centerpiece of the administration's effort to prevent firms with fewer than 500 employees from going out of business. The loan program is designed to get aid to millions of ailing businesses so they can keep their employees. Some top bank executives are balking at the terms of the program, which they warned in a rush to disperse funds that could lead them to be held liable under Know Your Customer provisions of the Bank Secrecy Act. The delays and uncertainty have left some small businesses in the lurch. Chris Landry, who runs a one person consulting firm in Northampton, Mass., said with his two children in college, he needs to know whether he can receive the loan, but has not been able to get answers from either his credit union or his bank. It's extremely frustrating. The guidelines are very confusing for people who aren't professional accountants. Other parts of the government response are already being exposed as inadequate to the challenge at hand. Congress has given the states an additional 1.5 billion to update their systems to process unemployment claims, when in reality the states probably need closer to an additional 30 billion to 60 billion. Yikes! That is a lot of money. Although it is unclear how much a Department of Labor will provide, according to Indiver Duda Gupta, co-executive director of the Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality. More than 25 states use processing servers that date back to the 1980s and have not been updated in decades. Multiple state unemployment websites have already crashed, and widespread reports that the newly laid off cannot get questions answers. Tears in the federal safety net are also surfacing as a concern. Millions more people will probably apply for federal welfare benefits but be denied because the program's costs are capped, said Michael Linden, a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, a left-leaning think tank. Up to 30 million Americans are at risk for losing their insurance because of the virus, which, and this point has been made so many times. It is not just immoral because these people don't give a they don't care about that. It is fundamentally irresponsible to deny people healthcare in the midst of a highly contagious pandemic. I don't it's that shouldn't need to be said. Like if there is a pandemic and an infection that is going around and killing a lot of people, I want everybody who has that infection to be cured. And it's not just because of empathy or whatever. It's because I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And with the number of celebrities and politicians getting tested positive for this, you'd think they would care about that too, but alas, no. State revenue is expected to plummet as economic activity grinds to a halt, depriving Medicaid, which provides insurance to the poor, of a key funding source. It's a perfect storm where the system is set up to collapse at a moment in need, said Rebecca Vallis, a poverty expert at the Center for American Progress, a left leaning think tank. Despite the early struggles in getting the stimulus program launched, the Trump administration has begun deliberations on an additional giant aid package. White House officials have in recent days discussed pitching a payroll tax cut, a capital gains tax cut, creating 50-year treasury bonds to lock in low interest rates, and a waiver that would clear businesses of liability from employees who contract the coronavirus on the job, according to two people with knowledge of internal White House deliberations who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to talk publicly. In public remarks, Trump has also seized on the idea of a $2 trillion infrastructure package after conversations with longstanding business associates in New York, an idea also popular among congressional Democrats. But Trump faces internal skepticism over an infrastructure bill from leading White House players, with Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Senior Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow seen as opposing the effort, according to some of the people familiar with internal dynamics. It's not clear whether officials are not moving fast enough to implement the first package to approve the second one for the crisis bearing down on the economy, some economists say. The administrative side of the government is completely overwhelmed right now, said Jason Furman, who served as a senior economist under the Obama administration. We had a creaky infrastructure to begin with, and now it's at risk of breaking. This is why small government people are filled with shit. You need a large, rigorous, bureaucratic infrastructure that runs like a well-oiled machine and is capable of doing difficult things in difficult times. Because look at what we're dealing with right now. You guys, this is nutty. It's straight nutty.